Today I'll be joined by Emmy Award-winning filmmaker Dawn Porter to talk about her gripping new Showtime documentary, Deadlocked, How America Shaped the Supreme Court. Welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm so happy to have you back. Congratulations on the film. You've worked on so many powerful titles, Good Trouble and Rise and Again, and now Deadlocked. They all challenge America. I wanted to ask you, when you make these films, these powerful films, and you do these deep historical dives, what kind of feedback do you get from people who buy into the idea of this precious, beautiful country? Because you tell hard truths.
That is a great question. I think people appreciate when they see how much work has gone into it. And one of the things that, we try really hard to do, so like with Deadlocked, there's 200 minutes of archival footage in the series. And that's on purpose. And that is because it's not what I think, is what happened.
Right,
it's
absolutely.
what people said. So Mitch McConnell, almost 30 years ago said, "You didn't confirm my guy, I'm never gonna confirm your people." And then, fast forward to Obama's pick for the Supreme Court, and there's Mitch McConnell, 260 plus days before the election, and he refuses to seat Barack Obama's Supreme Court pick. So, you kind of need to see these things to believe them. I think people who come to a series with an open mind appreciate the care that we take to put together, the facts. And then, I always say, I don't care what you take from the work, but you should take something from it. And what you can say. So, in Deadlocked episode 1, we spend a lot of time on Thurgood Marshall, and that's on purpose because Marshall, I don't know that people remember what a spectacular genius lawyer he and the Black people that worked with him were.
How many Supreme Court cases did he win? What was his
Marshall argued before the Supreme Court 32 times as a private lawyer and won 29 of the cases.
Out of control.
Out of control. And so he literally, if you think about it, he and Constance Baker Motley and the other, all Black legal team, they literally were dismantling segregation in America.
Absolutely.
Through their advocacy. That was not an accident. That was their strategy. So
I think Marshall was so good because he was a Baltimore guy. I could be wrong. I don't. I mean, you put that in the film. You talked about where he was from and in law school and all of that stuff. But I just, people need to know. And we'll get more into Marshall. But I would like you to just tell us how the whole project came together.
I used to work at ABC News, and Vinny Malhotra was a producer on World News Tonight. And Vinny called me up 3 years ago, and he had since moved on to Showtime and was the head of documentary. And he called me up and he was like, "Do you want to do something on the Supreme Court?" And I was like, "Yes." But we didn't have a plan, and that's actually something I love is okay, wait, you have the opportunity to tell a story. What story do you want to tell? So we kind of went through this process, and in doing the research, I thought, we have a lot of good news outlets, people reporting, Clarence Thomas took another $2 billion from some rich person, and those contemporary stories are important, but the history is important. And we have to know where we came from to understand where we are. So this very radical conservative Supreme Court is not an accident. It did not happen overnight. It did not even happen when Trump came in. This has been a process of decades moving the court to where it is today, where it is so out of step with the American public.
Will we ever see a justice like Thurgood Marshall again? Will it ever happen? Or even just someone who can lead with the law and what's right versus who I'm politically affiliated with?
Yeah, if you had asked me that a year ago, I would have said, I don't know, but I will say one thing that has been spectacular about Kentanji Brown Jackson, the latest justice to be seated, is what she's doing on the court in the dissents that she's writing. So the newest justice on the court, a Harvard undergraduate, you can't restate her qualifications enough because literally people said she wasn't qualified.
That's wild.
Editor of the Harvard Law Review, federal judge, just saying. And
it's like a cartoon.
She's like a cartoon. She's like, you couldn't craft this woman more perfectly, and still people are going to come for her. And what she's doing is so interesting because she's writing dissents and pointing out all the flaws in some of the recent decisions. And that is important because someday this court will, kind of come back, hopefully to the center at least. And she's really creating a roadmap for that future court. And that's important to do too.
And that's, and I'm so happy that you highlighted that in the film because as a writer, I'm on the road a lot, like since we don't have a lot of pandemic talk anymore. And I'm in front of a lot of young people. And every time I go to these high schools or I'm talking to people in their first 2 years of college and the conversation around the courts and comes up, it's almost like a joke. No one takes it serious. We only hear about Clarence Thomas and the money he's taking and how corrupt and how a person like him clearly doesn't take the job seriously.
Yeah. A
person like Donald Trump didn't take the job seriously.
Yeah.
And they're not buying into the system. What do you think? What should I be telling them?
Yeah, that's exactly why I made this series. And Showtime, to their credit, gave us 4 hours to tell this history. And the reason we started in episode 1 with Marshall and the Warren Court is because of all the great things that court did.
Right.
So before that Warren Court, the Supreme Court really mostly dealt with economic issues. And one economic issue they dealt with a lot was protecting the rights of slaveholders to control their slaves and to have economic benefit from the labor of enslaved people. And in the Warren Court, you see the court for the first time saying, wait a minute, the Bill of Rights applies to people, and that's our job. And so you have this time where Thurgood Marshall and Earl Warren together, Warren's on the court, Marshall's arguing before the court, and together you have this remarkable period where we get some of the most important rights that Americans, all those flag-waving people, it's because of those decisions. You have the right to an attorney. That's Gideon v. Wainwright in the Marshall Court. You get your Miranda rights read when you're arrested, hopefully, if they don't tase you first.
Right.
That's Miranda v. Arizona. Brown v. Board of Education. My grandmother used to talk about time. She would say, well, before the Supreme Court decision, like there was only one. Because for her, there was one. It was Brown v. Board. And this is also why I wanted to tell this story is I could have made this whole story about race and the court. Because race has it keeps showing up in so many decisions. But there was a time when particularly Black people, they were like, let's just get to the Supremes. And that was because Marshall would win.
Right.
But that's also because the court would hear these arguments and say, this is what we do. We protect the rights of the least powerful. And so that is the history, and that's what I would tell young people, is it hasn't always been like this, and it's gonna be up to you to make sure that it comes back to what it should be, protecting people who are not powerful, who are not rich.
We know the perception of the court now in the ideal democracy. What should happen when a justice takes gifts and gives favors and is unethical?
Yeah. It's not even like an ideal democracy. In our democracy, which is far from ideal, we need to hold the justices accountable. And, it's so interesting. literally today, the court refused, they kind of do it backwards. So Alabama has been trying to redistrict to like get rid of the black vote, essentially, to not give black people who are 27% of Alabama to not draw a district that has black representation. And once upon a time, when that went up to the Supreme Court, they would say Alabama can do what it wants. And we're seeing the court say, oh, nope, Alabama, you can't do that. So we're seeing public pressure and public opinion. I think that is influence in the court to actually say, like, maybe we better, moderate a little bit. But what should happen when we find justices who a wealthy donor owns their mother's house or pays for the tuition of their nephew or flies them on private jets to multi-million-dollar exclusive vacations, or flies them on private jets to an ideological conservative, how do we overturn 100 years of Supreme Court precedent meeting? And he has gone for the last 6 years to that same convening. What should we do to that, Justice? We should say, you have violated your oath and you are compromised, and we would urge you to step down and seek retirement. That's what we should say. What are we going to say? I think we're seeing a lot of pressure to at least adopt a code of ethics. I mean, the United States Supreme Court, the most powerful court in the world, has no code of ethics.
None.
If you are an administrative law judge in Temecula, you have a code of ethics.
Right.
And yet these justices do not. And it's gone far beyond, we will regulate ourselves, trust us. You have shown that you are not trustworthy.
You're not capable.
You're not trustworthy. And so, the Congress should step in, the president should step in and say, we demand that you at least abide by the ethics code that every other judge in this country has to comply with.
What do you think of term limits?
I actually support term limits. I think that there certainly could be a process where you have your terms and then you go back to the higher federal courts. You don't have to be fired, but you could do it in a way that would allow each new presidential administration to have the opportunity, should with these openings arise. I think it keeps the court relevant. I think it helps isolate the court from ideas that it is political as it has felt in recent years. I think that there are constitutional issues with term limits, and so we're not likely to see them. But we certainly, I think we need to do something really important. We're at a really, this is not a joke. There's no plan B for this country and for the rights that we have. And I would like to look a high schooler in the eye and say, you can believe in this court. This court has democracy at its heart.
I love RBG. Such an amazing, such an amazing person, an amazing figure, just important to our country in so many different ways. But she should have retired. And no one thought this guy was gonna win. No one thought that the White House would turn into a bigger circus than the Reagan years.
I think so RBG did not retire when Obama could have
exactly
put somebody in. But when you think about it, Obama should have been able to put Merrick Garland in.
True, very true.
So, I think what is being revealed is the fragility of our system, and that a lot of Supreme Court practice is actually, what we think of as norms, what people normally do. And when you have a Donald Trump, when you have a Mitch McConnell, they're not doing what has normally been done. And so to your earlier question, that is the argument for regulation. Because if people are not going to follow what has been done for 200 years, you let the sitting president nominate and confirm a Supreme Court justice when they're in office, then it's time to say, well, maybe we need some actual rules.
The series is so full of information. I've learned so much, and I'm watching it. I was just
wait, say that again. I taught you something,
so
Bridget.
So much.
Say it for the people in the back.
You've been teaching me since I discovered your work. And I wonder when you with so many hours of archival footage, so much research, all of the effort put into this, has your perspective on anything flipped?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's two things that have happened. One is, so I'm a lawyer. I went to Georgetown Law School, and I used to live on East Capitol Street, and I would walk to school. And when I was walking to school, I had to walk by the Supreme Court. And I would look up, and I would see that beautiful marble building, and it kind of takes your breath away. And I would think about what my grandmother said. I would think Thurgood Marshall was here, and it would just like make you stand up straight, right?
Took pride in it.
I took pride, and I was proud that I was in law school. I was proud that I had the opportunity to be in law school. I was proud that I was felt like I was following in some footsteps. And then over time, like a lot of people, I have just become so saddened and so cynical. And actually doing this, it made me realize I should be proud. And I can't just say, forget you, Supreme Court. I actually have to be part of trying to make it better, make it what it should be.
Because what Marshall did is still, it's done. He did it. We own that.
And we own that. And it's, it is as much a part of our history as any other accomplishment. So actually what making the series did was kind of reinvigorate my pride in what could be. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is the response to the series has been really great. And I was like, nobody's gonna watch this.
No. When I first saw that, even when I saw the promo for it, I was I was already oh yeah, we need, I hope we can get you in. So thank you for coming.
But I was, the way that documentary has gone, and what people are buying, and there's not always an appetite for things that begin in history. And so, we were worried, but I was like, this is what it needs to be. But also, as a filmmaker, I was like, this is what I want it to be. And so I'm just gonna do what I want.
I know, it's beautiful.
And kind of saying this series is meant to accompany all the reporters who are out there, sometimes screaming into the wind, saying, pay attention. And I, so I have, what else changed is I have been really heartened that so many people are this really helps me understand, and then hopefully a few people can we need to take back our flag.
Absolutely.
We this flag is for me, and so it's kind of strengthened my resolve.
Well, I think it's going to be transformative for so many people and used to teach for years. So won't you look right into that camera and tell everyone when and where they can see Deadlocked?
You can see Deadlocked on Showtime with Paramount Plus, and it's streaming now.